Hey kids, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is May 22nd. So here we are coming at you for the week of May 22nd through May 28th. But first, a question. Michelle wrote me a week or two ago. She had a doozy of an eclipse, as I think people did. The first paragraph or two about her email was about that. I'm not going to read that on the air, but she does ask, I've heard you talk about Chiron in your podcast as it relates to transits, but since it's not a planet, how exactly does Chiron move? And does its changing signs or location have an impact on the greater collective, like a Mercury retrograde, changing Pluto or Saturn return, for example? Great question. And my favorite planet in astrology in some ways is this strange body that we call Chiron. And the reason why he's obviously my favorite planet, I don't know if that's accurate, but they're all my favorites. You can't have a favorite planet.
Often we have your favorite.
Right. But why I would say that is because, what I'm a stand for in the world is change and transformation, healing trauma, self-actualizing who we are, and having a richer experience of what's possible for us in our embodiment. I use astrology as a primary tool for that, and Chiron is the planet or body that is responsible for healing the wounds of this lifetime, and it's our wounded consciousness that keeps us from our, most fabulous lives, right? So Chiron's movement and Chiron transits describe how that wound healing process is going. So, to answer the question, though, we have to say two major things. One is, indeed, Chiron is not a planet, and I have to sort of say air quotes planet, because it doesn't follow the rules of what we determine defines a planet. So that's the one thing that needs to be said. And the other thing that needs to be said is Chiron is a planet. and because remember, astrology is not astronomy.
Right.
So in the world of astronomy, we would declare that Chiron is a different type of body because it was formed in a different way. It behaves differently than a typical planet. That's the astronomy of it. But in the astrology of it, Chiron is just a body that moves. It moves exactly as other planets move, with the exception of this. Its orbit is a little more erratic and less concentric. It's not a clean circle or ellipse. It sort of moves more clunkily than any of the sort of 9 typical planets that we think of as our solar system planets. So those planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, those bodies all formed from the disk of energy that surrounded the sun, where eventually gravity caused certain bodies to coalesce around each other, creating planets, and that's not what Chiron is. In fact, we don't really know what Chiron is, but it was a newly discovered type of body in the 70s called centaurs. So some astronomer looked at the odd movement of this new type of body, watching it sort of move from near the outer planets of Saturn and Jupiter all the way out to the outer planets that start with Uranus and then sort of back again. So there's this large swath of space in between the planets that represent life on Earth, Jupiter and then Saturn. Then there are these planets that represent our high dimensional consciousness, our higher selves, our God selves. And that's the outer planets. It's the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. What happens in the in-between space is the vastness between our consciousness of life on a planet and the divine energy that guides us. And this centaur planet moves in that weird space. And so it's kind of like a body whose movement opens up our social experience to be more connected to our divine experience, because the blocks that keep that from happening are wounds of this life. So, in terms of, Michelle, your question about how to treat Chiron and his transits and his retrogrades, it's just like any other planet. He moves through signs. It's about a 50-year orbit. Divide that by 12. And you just want to think of Chiron transits exactly like any other planet. And though this is a body that behaves differently than the other standard planets that are endemic to the original solar system, Chiron's movement is just like a planet, just in a different place in the solar system that causes it to have a different name. But it's different sort of classification we don't have to worry about too much in astrology. In fact, his different classification for me as an astrologer just is the beautiful archetypal sense of the part of us, our inner shaman, our inner healer, is not like the rest of us. It's a sort of extra helpful energy, just like a centaur in the woods in mythology might have been, that mysterious creature that helps us through the woods. And in this symbolism, the woods is our shadow work, and Chiron's movement and his transits and his retrogrades and his moving in between signs is just us doing the deep healing work that allows us to open up to our divine consciousness more powerfully. Well, we are smack dab in the middle of this fixed grand cross that I talked about in last week's podcast that started up in earnest last week when Jupiter moved into Taurus and bumped right into a square with Pluto, and Mars is sort of really jumping on top of that cross this week, literally starting today where Mars is going to square Jupiter. But let's back up for a second and just do a little bit of a teaching on what exactly a fixed cross is and what's different, say, between the other kinds of grand crosses that we can have, the mutable and the cardinal. In the world of astrology, there are different ways we characterize the energy that signs can embody. There's a way of describing the energy of signs called the modalities. A modality is just a way that energy is stewarded and used. There are 3 modalities in astrology. The first is cardinal, then comes fixed, and then mutable. So every sign is going to be one of these modalities, either cardinal, fixed, or mutable. The cardinal signs, well, first let's define cardinal, right? Cardinal means to start up, to initiate, to move. Well, to move. Mm-hmm. So cardinal signs are the signs that carry within them a sense of movement. And this will make immediate sense to you guys when I remind you that the cardinal signs are also the signs of the equinoxes and the solstices. So that Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, the 4 cardinal signs, are also the signs that start up each of the 4 seasons. But I also want you to put your thinking caps on about cardinal, and it's not just about the seasons. Cardinal just means a sign whose energy is more attuned to getting things moving, to initiate the start of something new. The third modality, the mutable signs, are about fluidity, flexibility, and the capacity to change shape. So you've got Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces as the mutable signs. And those are signs where the energy allows this fluidity, flexibility, and movement to take place. But sometimes we don't need energy that starts things up, and we don't need energy that moves. We need the solidity and the foundational notion of fixed signs. The fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. These are the energies that offer less movement and fluidity, and they're not really about starting things up. They allow us to have the experience of non-movement, of foundation. And so that we called it fixed energy because they are essentially fixed. Now, one might think, oh, that's bad and other energy good. And there's no bad or good in cardinal, fixed, or mutable. There's only what do you need to do and how much do you need of each quality to create the thing that you want to attend to, right? The cardinal energy will start something up. The mutable energy will allow something to happen as the thing occurs, and the fixed energy is the stability on which we stand. Where this becomes a problem is when we have a setup like we do now, where there are 4 planets, or in the case of Taurus, more than one planet, at a point in each of these fixed signs relating to each other in this cross, this square. Squares are about conflict and obstacle. And so if you've got a bunch of planets expressing conflict and obstacle energy in a week like last week and this week, we're all going to be processing some conflict and some obstacles. And we're right smack dab in the middle of that. And if you're tuning into this podcast on Monday the 22nd, you're probably already in some bumping up against conflicts and obstacles. But because the signs are fixed, it's like running your head into a brick wall. And so what happened at the very tail end of last week on May 20th is Mars moved into Leo, the 4th fixed sign of the square that's already been in place from Jupiter in Taurus, squaring Pluto in Aquarius. So the Jupiter North Node and Mercury stellium in Taurus is in conflict energy with the Lord of the underworld. So that's expansion, Jupiter. Our minds and our perceptions guiding that expansion, Mercury. And the North Node, our desired future. There it is in Taurus, grounded, stable in our hearts. Jupiter in Taurus is promising us all the cash and prizes. Only now we're bumped into the change and transformation of Pluto saying, yeah, you want that thing? Are you willing to do the changes that have to be made in order to have that thing? And remember, this isn't mutable energy. We're not in the fluidity of change. We're in the resistance of non-change. Then when Mars over the weekend moved into Leo, that's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to act. I'm ready to be extroverted and powerful in the world and self-expressed in a public way. Only Mars squares Jupiter and opposes Pluto. So that means we're in conflict about the cash and prizes we're trying to create because the action planet and the abundance planet are in conflict. An opposition from Mars to Pluto is like just being pummeled by things you maybe didn't know, things that were in the shadow, in the basement, power and authority that says, oh, you want this? I'm going to stop you in your tracks, right? So that's the Mars portion of this. And of course, the other corner of the square is the South Node in Scorpio, the past that we're looking to move away from and create these sort of changes that we desire. That the past is one of the conflicts in this fixed grand cross. So Mars added to this energy just 2 days ago over the weekend, moving into Leo. And today, Monday the 22nd, Mars and that square to Jupiter is exact. So, in some ways, technically, today's square from Mars to Jupiter and yesterday's opposition from Mars to Pluto makes yesterday and today the peak of this very consternating, is that a word? Consternating? Yes, I'm in consternation because I want to move and be in flow, and all I'm hitting is obstacles. In some ways, that's true, with the big but. And here's the big but. The nodes of the moon are part of this fixed grand cross, which really means that the conflict that we're in right now is amplified because of how powerfully we are attempting to leave our pasts behind and create a brand new paradigm. So that south node in Scorpio has just as much power during this latter part of last week and much of this week, has the power to put the brakes on in a way that says, no, we're not. The past is not going to let you move forward, right? So there may be conflicts about things you've got to untether from your past before you can move forward. And that potential experience looks like Mars T-squaring both the south node and the north node of the moon on Friday of this week. So right now, Mars is at 0 degrees of Leo, but on Friday, he'll be at 3 degrees of Leo, and that's where the south node in Scorpio is and the north node in Taurus is.
That means the end of the cross?
Well, let me say, that's the portion of this cross experience that puts what we either learned or changed or bruised into action and movement. Like if we were to just look at Mars in a T-square with the nodes in a vacuum, it would signal a moment where our action plan needs other people and other associations to move forward, because the nodes almost always play out as group connections, but through conflict and challenge. So Mars squaring the south node is an energy of, I'm having difficulty processing something about my past. It's grabbed my attention and it won't let me move forward unless I handle the problem. While simultaneously squaring the north node, saying there are challenges around the desires I have to move forward. And I'm going to have to process those as well, like at the same time. So to answer your question, Zoe, there's several ways I'll answer it. One is, I think the actual cross ends today, and Friday is the sort of signal about what it's going to be like to take whatever we've learned in this last week or so and push forward in a new way that might bring up another set of conflicts. And we could also look at it that it peaks next weekend. Either way, this week's going to suck.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, listen, I said that in the way that I said that to make you guys laugh and so laugh. So brava, to me for being funny in a dad joke sort of way. But truly, a week that starts with Mars squaring Pluto and opposing Mars squaring Jupiter and opposing Pluto, which is just a setup for the shadow to be all over our desires. And then a day at the end of the week that says that anything that we're attempting to push forward into the future is going to be done through conflict and obstacle energy. It's a bumpy week. Now, what it isn't, Zoe, is an eclipse season with a simultaneous retrograde of Mercury, right?
So lighter, it's lighter.
Way lighter, but still about, and I'm sorry to keep using these words over and over again, but they're the right words, conflict and obstacles. And so, If you want to have a sense of what I mean for you guys in terms of the timbre of that or the intensity of that, last week will give you a sense of this week. The fixed Grand Cross that amplifies this week got started last week. So your measure of the week ahead will have a lot to do with the week behind. So, keeping in mind what I just said about not as bad as the first 2 weeks in May, we do have the potential for a slightly rough weekend ahead. Partly because of everything that I just set up, talking about the fixed Grand Cross's last big moment is Friday, and so that energy we're going to feel on Thursday, a peak on Friday, and it will bleed into Saturday, maybe even Sunday, of obstacles and problems coming up around, the movement you want to sort of generate. But Saturday is also the first quarter moon, which means it's a crisis moment in the lunar cycle. We will be a week out from the new moon that hit just this past weekend. And it's a moment of crisis. When the moon and the sun are together, what's valuable about that is that our conscious awareness, the sun, and our unconscious impulses, the moon, which are just so vastly different, when they are in the same sign and in a kind of geometrical alignment, there's an ease about that moment in the lunar cycle because our conscious awareness and our unconscious impulses are in this same area. Then at the full moon, 2 weeks later, there's the beautiful culmination of everything that lunar cycle is going to bring us. But halfway between the moon and the sun together and the moon and the sun in opposition, the moon will square the sun and they will relate to each other in the 90-degree angle of conflict. The same 90-degree angle of conflict being held by Mars and Jupiter and Pluto and the South Node. So the first quarter moon is not like a tidal wave where we drop into the, abyss of challenge, but it is a standard stressful moment in the lunar cycle where we might be a little bit at odds with ourselves because our conscious awareness and our unconscious impulses now, instead of being in some form of harmony, are in the greatest disharmony in the lunar cycle, which is the squares. So that's on Saturday. And on the same day, the sun and Saturn are going to square each other. That's adding a kind of big type of conflict into the mix of what's an already conflictual soup. But it's a mutable square, a fluid square, right? So sun in Gemini now is a mutable sign. The mutability of Gemini, the shadow of that at any rate, is overthinking. So if you've got our solar consciousness in a mansion where the shadow is going to be overthinking, and of course we've got to look at the shadows because we're in conflict geometry of a square. So the shadow artifact of Sun in Gemini is too much thinking and not enough precision or clarity and too much debate. Saturn is in the mutable sign of Pisces, also boundaryless and unclear about what is required in any given moment. So in the midst of this very solid, fixed Grand Cross of conflicts of immovability, we've got this confused, I'm not sure what to do next. I'm thinking too hard. I'm being overloaded with ideas, and therefore I can't decide what's right or wrong. That's hitting us on Saturday. So the whole week builds a sense of conflict. The weekend drives it home to an even greater extent. And so we're going to be leaving this week in a potentially confusing and bothersome energy of too much input, too much thought, lack of clarity, and perhaps being a little bit done with bumping into the wall.
So, what would one might do to navigate all this conflict?
Perfect question. The first thing I'll say is, in the listening to this podcast, please remember and re-remember that my hyperbolic language sets me up to have to say to you what I'm describing will not be as blatantly challenging as anything that happened in the first or the second week of May. Okay. So sometimes when people hear things that I say, I always have to sort of qualify a little bit. Okay. I'm using dramatic language, but we're not talking about the kind of blindness that happens when we're in a retrograde and an eclipse. That's number one. Number two, if you hit the wall of an obstacle, respect it. Now, respecting an obstacle doesn't mean capitulating to, oh my God, the world is saying no to my desire. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you meet a moment of resistance, I would not push through at this time. Right? So I wouldn't meet anything that comes up this week that would look like a conflict and obstacle with more aggression.
Let it flow.
Let it flow, which will not necessarily be easy now that we've got Mars in Leo. Mars in Leo is going to inspire us all to roar and yell and demand and be in, sort of like, do you know who I think I am energy. But he's expressing great conflict as he moves this week. So we don't want to respond to our aggressive, reactionary consciousness when we bump into the wall. I would say if you bump into a wall, what do you want to do first? I would say sit down and lean up against the wall and have a sandwich.
Okay.
And then think about how to meet the wall instead of meeting the wall with a hammer. Right? And then over the weekend, it's like there's nothing about a square between Sun and Saturn that is beyond receiving the benefit of the teaching. The challenge is, the lesson is, we don't really always know what we think we need to know in order to move clearly. That might be a message of Sun in Gemini, who's thinking, squaring the teacher in Pisces, where there is no clarity, there is no landing or sticking the answer in Pisces. So I would say the weekend's guidance would be dial into your spiritual practice and find the faith needed to say, this no from the universe does not move me. And that's different than fighting it.
Right.
Like the one who says, this no does not move me, is the person who bumps up against the wall, sits down and has a sandwich. The person who pulls out their hammer and starts trying to break down the wall, that person is in resistance and arguing with the world. If the world in the solar system is saying things are bumpy and not moving with flow, that it's a chop wood, carry water, brick by brick kind of week. Try to see it from that perspective rather than, I didn't get what I want, therefore, my desires and intention mechanism might be broken. It'd be easy to read the memes of astrology, people out there saying, Jupiter and Taurus, everyone's going to get more cash and prizes, and have the first thing we bump into is a lot of no. Jupiter in Taurus says we can, in fact, have everything we desire, within the limits that I talk about all the time. But the entrance of Jupiter in Taurus also says, do you feel committed to your yes fully? Because the universe is going to say no to you a lot, and it's a test. So that would be another way to get through the week, would be say to yourself, if the universe says no, this does not move me, but don't do it with a fist. Do it sitting down, leaning up against the wall, and having that sandwich I keep talking about. And have at it, kids.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Today we have a call-in dreamer, and Collins is calling in from the San Juan Islands on a boat, which is what I heard.
Wait, what? Like a real boat?
Collins is right?
Collins, you're on a...
Yes, definitely a real boat. Yeah, we're floating right now.
love that.
Oh my God, that's okay. That's a dream. I was talking to a podcaster floating on a boat. I had a dream. All right, beautiful. What you dreaming?
Great. So my dreams got two different things. One, a mythical creature, and then the other feature would be that I woke up from the dream, then went back into the dream. So two different things that I have not experienced before, but this is how it goes. I'm with a guy, we're dating. It's very new. There's some aspect of me not kind of trusting him or thinking maybe he's a little passive aggressive nice. And I feel like the relationship's moving a little fast. And he wants to take me to a house where he wants us to move in together. And I'm kind of like, oh God, this is also happening so soon. And the house is like white on white. There's nothing really special about the house, but it's got this spectacular view of the water, and you're kind of looking through these trees, and I'm really intrigued by that. All of a sudden it's nighttime, and it happens really fast. And I'm like, God, I don't know if I should get home right now. Can I spend the night? And all of a sudden we're sort of standing in a doorway. And that's when he's like, I need you to shut this door right now. And I'm like, what? Okay. And he's like, lock it right now. So I shut the door and I hit the little push button lock, and then instantly you hear all this noise and growling. And I know internally he's turning into a werewolf. And it's like violent. And I'm super freaked out. There's a big window with a curtain on the door, and I can sort of peer through that bottom part of that curtain, and I'm aware I can see him, or see the werewolf. And I know that if I make any noise, I want to open that curtain, but I don't want to aggravate the werewolf. I am so freaking scared. That part of the dream is very powerful. And I know I can't get out of this room. So I look over, and there's like this little mattress on the ground, and I go over there, and there's like this little tiny dainty blue blanket, and I cover myself, just wanting this whole experience to stop. And eventually I kind of fall asleep, and I'm really freaked out. And then I wake up, and I know it's kind of safe to leave the room, and I go down the hallway, and his sister is down the hallway. And I ask her, your brother didn't tell me that he was a werewolf. I'm pissed off about this. Like, this is such a secret, and you wouldn't reveal this. And she tells me it's like a family trait. I also turn into a werewolf, but I have more control over it, and I'm more docile. And then I instantly wake up into waking life. Just that fear that was in the dream transfers and like shoves me awake. And then I'm sitting in bed like, holy shit, I just dreamed of a werewolf. I'm an active dreamer, and I've never had a dream like that. So I finally get cozy, and I fall back asleep. And then in this part, I fall back asleep, and now I am transporting my mother from her nursing home. and we're going to go to doctor's appointments. And this is something that happens a lot in real life, waking life. And she's like, I want to take a nap. And I take her to that house. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And there's no one there except a worker. And he's working on the house. He's doing upgrades. And she's like, I'm really tired. I want to take a nap. So I'm like, great. I'm going to take you into this back room and you're going to take a nap. And then all of a sudden, in dreamland, time moves. And I look and my little sister's with us. And I'm like, oh my God, we got to get mom going. We need to take her to this doctor's appointment. And so I walk down the back hallway. And then there's this odd blue LED light that's around the doorknob. And I'm definitely like, this is weird, like, okay. And I open it and I don't really know what it's for, but I have ideas. And then I open up that doorknob and there's my little mama and there's a little thin blanket on her and you can just see she's so cozy and I got to wake her up. And I'm like, okay, mom, like you got to rouse and I know it's going to take a second. So I walk down the hallway and I turn around and my mother is walking out and she can't walk. And she walks out of this room and she's like, I just had the most amazing sleep of my life. Like it was so magical. And the light that came in the room, I feel so rested. It was just this like, and I'm like, Mom, you're fucking walking. Like, this is crazy. You're walking. Like, do you not notice you're walking? And she's kind of just makes herself, walks herself into her little wheelchair. And I'm like, well, shit, we got to get to that doctor's appointment. Boom, end of dream.
So, Collins, how would you describe the sort of inherited generational perspectives about love and relationships that come from your matriarchal line that cause this life's biggest challenges in love, intimacy, and relationship?
Well, I definitely am very connected to my mom. It's been a long journey. I don't know if I'm going to answer this question right, but
there's no right answer to the question. It's
I know,
just
I'm
a
like,
prompt to get you to talk more.
Yeah, just that that it has been a long, hard journey because my mom is now my child.
Right. And you're literally
a ton of respect.
Yes.
And she's very young, she's in her 70s. So I would say it's been a hard journey for the both of us in what it is requiring, the output and acceptance of where life is and me having to give up a lot of my life to take care of this woman I love. Yeah.
Well, what strikes me about the dream is that the bigger theme to me is ultimately about healing intergenerational wounds that show up as patterns in you that have to do with the family of origin. The reason is your mom's there, your sister's there, so there's your families in there. There's some really clear message from the werewolf part of you in this dream that's delivered through the sister, which says, oh, this is family-oriented. This is intergenerational. I can't help it that when the moon is full, I lose my fucking shit and want to destroy love. So that's so that's the ending aha that excites me. So let me backtrack to the beginning. You're dating a guy, right? So we look at anything, a budding relationship like that in dreamland is about integration. Right? That I'm assuming you identify as a woman and with she pronouns. Is that accurate? Okay. So a dream about dating a man is about calling up the masculine principle in you and its current level of integration process. It's like, okay, there's a part of me I'm not quite trusting. This is moving a little too fast. I'm not sure if these impulses are passive aggressive. Remember, it's not his dream. He's just a guy in your dream. It's your dream. So it's you thinking about what's brewing in the world of integrating my masculine and feminine. This does not have to be about romance per se, though it can be about your intimacy life if the dream says I'm dating this guy, but it can also just be about the balance between what do I get to do and what do I get to be in a life where I've given up so much of the doing to care for my mother, right? So whether the split of masculine and feminine is about where your resources are going or your relationship to love and intimacy, this dream for me covers both. And you get to a new sort of house, something that's not quite your house, right? So it's not your sense of self. Houses are all about sense of self. This white on white suggests a kind of purity, right? Where all light is shined into this sense of self. We're like, for my money, that house in the dream is about a house where it's so bright, white on white, that we can see all of our shadows.
Okay.
I love that in this house, there's a spectacular view of water through trees, right? So we're in a very organic, nurturing, healing place. But we're clearly somewhere to do a process because suddenly it becomes nighttime. Now we're in shadow. It's like, okay, can I spend the night? Why? Because we're about to do some deep shadow work. The day has ended and we got to do. And he's like, okay. Here's the nugget. You want to do this shadow work? You have to understand that inside of us is this raging, seething werewolf thing that sort of beyond my control. This rage will rise up. And you need to know this. It's like lock the door, shut the door. This is part of you or part of us, if you will, right? So then there's this, like, I love the curtains, the peeking behind the curtains, because there's a trope in that image that says something is hidden from me, but if I have the courage, I'll be able to peer behind the curtain. You know, once Toto pulled the curtain back from the Wizard of Oz in in that movie, you're a little young for the reference, as powerful as it is for me, who grew up with the Wizard of Oz on TV every spring. But it's like pull back the curtain. And so something about this werewolf turning into a werewolf where you want to open the curtain more, but you don't want to bother the monster. And then you say you can't get out of this room anyway.
Yeah.
So now we know the dream is saying, okay, Collins, you do not get to go beyond this point without taking responsibility for the way in which mood or trigger or the placement of the moon could inspire these big, raging, growling, moments. Fascinating that everything is blue.
Yeah.
The dainty blanket is blue, the LED light is blue, and blue is the color we associate with the throat chakra. So I would invite you to consider how this dream is talking about the shit that flies out of your mouth.
Or I hold in.
Or that you hold in. Oh, even better. Ooh, I like that even better, Collins, because the holding is the tension maybe that makes the werewolf have to turn into a monster once a month because the monster needs the light of day. You're holding it back so much. Ooh, and now if we add in caretaking your 70-something-year-old mother, which has really debilitated your ability to move into the world powerfully on your own steam, oh my God.
Yeah, that's it. That I would say that's really speaking to me in the sense of...
Yeah, beautiful. So then, but let's add the coda. The coda is even more beautiful because now we go into a place where upgrade is being done. Like you even bump into the worker. He's the part of you directing the shadow work at the moment. We're working on this inner landscape. And the inner mother voice is having a healing. And it includes this blue light. So there's definitely a connection between the healing that happens when you're in this sort of part of the dream that you entered after you went back to sleep that says, this is what we're working on. We're actually doing shadow work on this issue of how can I free up my voice to express some of my darker qualities of frustration and bother so that I don't turn into a werewolf once a month.
Yeah. Or maybe would you say that maybe I should turn into a werewolf a little more?
I would always go in that direction, yes, right? Because most people who hold back are holding back way more than serves them. And I would rather have that person explode into making everything important in order to find the balance that exists in a more authentic place. It's easier to pull back than it is to amp up. So go whole hog, baby, and then, find your center. Juicy dream, Colin. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Oh my God. Thank you guys so much. I love what you guys do and bring to the table, and your perspective and your gift of words and abundance of information is so fabulous. And I love you guys.
Well,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you, Colin. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.